The crystal chandeliers sparkled above the crowd as Victoria Whitmore moved through her penthouse like a queen surveying her kingdom. Tonight's charity gala had to be perfect. Every detail mattered. The champagne, the catering, the guest list of Manhattan's wealthiest elite. Everything was going according to plan until her phone buzzed with the worst possible news. "What do you mean he's not coming?" Victoria hissed into her phone, stepping away from her guests. The pianist she'd hired had canceled. Food poisoning, he claimed. She didn't care about the reason. She only cared that her $300,000 Steinway grand piano would sit silent in the corner while 100 influential people mingled in her living room. Victoria pressed her fingers to her temple. She'd built a tech empire from nothing, survived hostile takeovers, and negotiated billion-dollar deals. But right now she felt her carefully planned evening crumbling over something as simple as background music. She scanned the room, searching for solutions. That's when she noticed him. The boy stood near the piano, awkward and out of place in a blazer that had clearly seen better days. His sneakers were scuffed, his hair needed cutting, and he kept his hands shoved deep in his pockets like he was trying to make himself invisible. He was maybe 17, maybe 18. Victoria recognized him immediately. Daniel, her housekeeper's son. Rosa had brought him along tonight to help with coats and serving drinks. Victoria had approved it without much thought. The boy was quiet, respectful, stayed out of the way. Exactly what you wanted from the Helps family. But now, looking at him standing near that silent piano, Victoria had an idea. She walked over, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Daniel looked up, startled, his eyes widening as his boss approached. "You?" Victoria said, keeping her voice low so nearby guests wouldn't hear. "Do you play piano?" Daniel's face went pale. Mrs. Whitmore, I don't think... It's a simple question. Can you play or not?" Victoria's smile was tight. She had 200 people arriving in the next half hour and no pianist. She didn't have time for hesitation. "A little," Daniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I'm not perfect. I need someone to play background music. Nothing fancy. Just something pleasant while people talk and drink. Can you do that?" From across the room, Rosa caught sight of the conversation. Victoria saw the worry flash across her housekeeper's face, but Rosa quickly masked it with a professional smile. She gave her son a small nod. Daniel swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. Wonderful. Sit down and start playing. Keep it quiet. Nobody should notice the music. They should just feel the atmosphere. Understand?" Victoria didn't wait for an answer. She was already turning away, greeting a tech mogul who'd just arrived. The piano situation was solved. Crisis averted. Time to focus on what really mattered, schmoozing donors for her new arts foundation. Behind her, Daniel stood frozen for a moment. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled them from his pockets. He looked at his mother one more time. Rosa smiled at him, the kind of smile that said, "You can do this," even though her eyes held uncertainty. Daniel sat down at the piano bench. The Steinway was the most expensive instrument he'd ever touched. At home, he practiced on a second-hand keyboard his mother had bought at a garage sale for $50. At school, if he was lucky, he could sneak into the music room during lunch. But this was different. He adjusted the bench, his worn sneakers barely touching the pedals properly. Around him, the party grew louder. People laughed, clinked glasses, talked about stock prices and vacation homes. Nobody was watching him. Nobody cared. Daniel placed his fingers on the keys. He started with something simple. A Chopin nocturne he'd taught himself from a library book when he was 14. The first notes floated out, tentative and soft, exactly what Mrs. Whitmore had asked for. Background music. Nothing fancy. But then something shifted inside him. His fingers found their rhythm. The nervousness melted away. The room full of rich strangers faded. It was just Daniel and the piano, the way it always was in those early morning hours when he'd sneak in here to practice while his mother cleaned. The melody grew, expanded, breathed. His hands moved across the keys with a speed and precision that came from thousands of hours of practice. He added his own flourishes, his own interpretation. The Chopin became something else entirely, something that belonged to him. One by one, conversations in the room began to fade. A woman in a diamond necklace stopped mid-sentence, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. A banker turned from his discussion about interest rates. A tech executive pulled out his phone, then forgot about it entirely as his attention was pulled to the music filling the room. The notes cascaded through the penthouse like water, like light, like something alive. Daniel's eyes were closed now. His body swayed slightly with the melody. His fingers danced across the keys, moving so fast they seemed to blur. The worn blazer and scuffed sneakers didn't matter anymore. At the piano, he was transformed. Near the windows, Victoria was deep in conversation with a potential donor, discussing her new foundation for supporting young artists. She was explaining her vision, finding undiscovered talent, giving opportunities to kids who wouldn't otherwise have them, breaking down barriers in the classical arts world. "It's not about charity," Victoria said, warming to her subject. "It's about recognizing excellence wherever it exists. So many brilliant young people get overlooked simply because they don't have the right connections or the right background. I want to change that." The donor nodded approvingly. "It's a wonderful mission, Victoria. You've always had an eye for spotting talent." Behind them, Daniel continued to play. The nocturne had ended, flowing seamlessly into a Rachmaninoff piece that would have challenged most professional pianists. But Victoria didn't notice. She was too busy talking about her vision, her foundation, her plans to discover genius in unexpected places. Around the room, guests were transfixed. Some had tears in their eyes. Others stood with their mouths slightly open, unable to look away from the teenage boy at the piano. A few pulled out their phones, trying to record the moment. An older gentleman in an expensive suit approached the piano. He was David Chen, a legendary music producer who discovered 3 of the last decade's most successful classical crossover artists. He stood very still, listening intently, his experienced ear catching things others might miss. The technical perfection, the emotional depth, the raw, undeniable genius. This kid wasn't just good. This kid was extraordinary. When Daniel finally finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the applause erupted. Not the polite clapping of background appreciation, but genuine, thunderous applause. Daniel's eyes snapped open. He looked around, confused, as if waking from a dream. His cheeks flushed red. He hadn't meant to play like that. He was supposed to stay in the background, unnoticed. Across the room, Victoria glanced over, mildly surprised by the commotion. She smiled and raised her glass slightly in Daniel's direction. "See," she said to her donor. "The boy has a nice touch. Rose's son. I let him play at my events sometimes. Sweet kid." She turned back to her conversation, already moving on to the next topic. David Chen remained by the piano. He waited until Daniel stood up, then quietly pressed a business card into the boy's hand. "Call me," he whispered. "We need to talk." Daniel looked down at the card, his heart pounding. David Chen, he knew that name. Everyone who loved music knew that name. But before he could respond, his mother caught his eye from across the room. She gestured subtly. Time to help with the coats, time to serve drinks, time to remember who he really was in this world of chandeliers and champagne. Daniel pocketed the card and disappeared into the background once more, invisible again among the wealthy crowd that had just witnessed something remarkable, without truly understanding what they'd seen. 3 months had passed since that first night at the piano. 3 months of Victoria calling Rosa whenever she needed that boy who plays. 3 months of Daniel showing up in his same worn blazer, sitting at that magnificent Steinway, and disappearing into the music while the wealthy talked and laughed around him. Victoria never asked his last name. She never asked where he learned to play, or if he had dreams beyond her penthouse parties. To her, he was simply convenient, available, good enough for background music. After each event, she'd slip him a $50 bill and tell him he did a nice job. $50. The same amount she'd spend on a single bottle of wine without thinking twice. Daniel never complained. He pocketed the money, thanked her politely, and left with his mother when the cleaning was done. But that business card from David Chen stayed in his wallet, creased and worn from being taken out and stared at during late nights when sleep wouldn't come. He'd never called the number. What would he even say? That he was a high school senior from the Bronx who taught himself piano from library books? That he practiced on a keyboard that was missing 2 keys? That he'd applied to Juilliard twice and been rejected both times because his phone recordings weren't good enough quality, and he couldn't afford the application fee until after the deadlines? No, people like David Chen didn't waste time on people like Daniel. That night had been a fluke. A moment, nothing more. But the truth was, Daniel lived for those early mornings when his mother had to start work before dawn. She'd let him into the penthouse at 5 a.m., and while she cleaned, he'd play. Those quiet hours before the city woke up were his. Just him and the piano and the slowly brightening sky beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Victoria had walked in on him once, arriving early for a breakfast meeting. She'd paused in the doorway of her living room, coffee cup in hand, watching Daniel play with his eyes closed. Completely lost in a complex Bach fugue. "You're here early," she'd said, and Daniel had jumped up so fast he nearly knocked over the bench. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore, my mom said it was okay. I'll stop. I didn't mean to." "It's fine." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "You play very nicely. It's pleasant to wake up to." Then she drifted off to her office, already checking emails on her phone, and that was that. Pleasant. The word had stung more than it should have. At school, Daniel was invisible in a different way. He kept his head down, did his homework in the library during lunch so he could use the music room after school, and avoided talking about his mother's job. The other kids didn't need to know that while they complained about their tutors and their college essay coaches, Daniel was serving champagne to people who made more in an hour than his mother made in a year. His music teacher, Mr. Patterson, was the only one who understood. He'd caught Daniel staying late one afternoon, playing a Liszt piece that most professional pianists wouldn't attempt. "Where did you learn that?" Mr. Patterson had asked, genuine shock in his voice. "YouTube mostly," Daniel had admitted. "And there's this website where people break down the techniques. I've been working on it for like 8 months. Mr. Patterson had gone quiet for a long moment. "Daniel, you're better than good. You know that, right? You're exceptional." Daniel had shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Doesn't matter much, does it? Can't afford conservatory, can't afford a real piano, can't even afford to make a decent audition video. There are scholarships, programs for students like you, students like me." Daniel had smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, I've looked into it. Everyone wants you to have years of formal training, competition wins, a whole resume of stuff I don't have. All I've got is a second-hand keyboard and stolen time on other people's pianos." Mr. Patterson hadn't known what to say to that, because it was true. The classical music world had doors, and those doors required keys that Daniel simply didn't have. The invitation to Victoria's spring gala arrived on expensive cardstock, delivered by messenger to Rosa's small apartment. It wasn't addressed to Rosa. It was addressed to Ms. Rosa Martinez and Son. Daniel held the heavy paper, reading Victoria's flowery handwriting at the bottom. "Please bring Daniel. I'll need him at the piano." Not an invitation. "A work assignment. You don't have to go," Rosa said quietly, watching her son's face. "I can tell her you're busy, that you have school stuff. We need the money, Mom." Daniel set the invitation down on their small kitchen table. "And besides, it's just a few hours. It's fine." But it wasn't fine, and they both knew it. The night of the gala, Daniel arrived to find the penthouse transformed. This wasn't just another party. This was Victoria's biggest event of the year. The launch of her new foundation for supporting young artists. The irony wasn't lost on Daniel as he read the banner stretched across one wall, "Discovering Tomorrow's Talent Today." The guest list was even more impressive than usual. Daniel recognized faces from magazines and news broadcasts, politicians, celebrities, people who could change lives with a single phone call. He took his place at the piano, adjusting the familiar bench, placing his hands on the familiar keys. Around him, the party swirled and sparkled. He was furniture, part of the ambiance. There but not there, he played for 3 hours straight. Chopin, Debussy, Gershwin, Bach. His own arrangements, his own interpretations. His fingers flew across the keys, telling stories to an audience that wasn't listening. Victoria gave her speech at 8 o'clock. She stood in front of the piano, so close that Daniel had to stop playing, and spoke passionately about the importance of finding and nurturing young talent regardless of background or circumstances. "Too often," Victoria said, her voice ringing with conviction, "we overlook brilliance simply because it doesn't come in the package we expect. A kid from the wrong neighborhood, a student without the right connections, someone who doesn't fit our narrow definition of what genius should look like." The crowd nodded and murmured approval. Victoria was radiant, genuine in her passion. She truly believed every word she was saying. "That's why I'm committing $10 million to this foundation. Victoria continued. To find those hidden gems. To give opportunities to young people who have the talent but not the resources. Because talent isn't about privilege. It's about dedication, passion, and raw ability. The applause was thunderous. People were actually moved. Daniel could see tears in some eyes. Victoria finished her speech and gestured gracefully toward the piano. Now, please continue enjoying the evening. Let the music play. That was Daniel's cue. He started playing again. Quiet, pleasant, background. Not once during her entire speech about discovering overlooked talent had Victoria mentioned his name. Not once had she gestured to him specifically, introduced him, acknowledged that the music filling her penthouse for months had come from anywhere other than thin air. He was 30 feet away from her, providing the soundtrack to her moment, and he was completely invisible. An older woman approached the piano during a break between pieces. She was elegant with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a classic bun. "You play beautifully, young man," she said. "Where do you study?" Daniel felt his face flush. I'm still in high school. Just at a public school in the Bronx. But your technique, your interpretation, surely you have a private instructor?" "No, ma'am. Just YouTube and library books mostly." The woman's eyes widened. She opened her mouth to say something else, but Victoria appeared at her elbow, smoothly steering her away toward the bar. "Catherine, you simply must meet the ambassador. He's been asking about you all evening." Daniel watched them go. The woman glanced back once, a strange expression on her face. But Victoria was already introducing her to someone else, and the moment passed. Later, a man who looked vaguely familiar stopped near the piano. Daniel recognized him after a moment, a music critic who wrote for the New York Times. He stood listening for several minutes, his expression growing more and more intense. Finally, he approached Victoria. Daniel was close enough to hear the conversation over his playing. "Victoria, your pianist is remarkable." "Who is he? Where did you find him?" Victoria barely glanced over. "Oh, that's just Rosa's son. My housekeeper. Sweet boy. He plays at all my events. But his talent, he's quite good, isn't he? I'm so glad I can give him these opportunities. It's exactly what my foundation is about." The critic looked like he wanted to say more, but Victoria had already moved on to another group of guests. He stood there for a moment, staring at Daniel with an expression that might have been pity or frustration or both, before walking away. David Chen arrived late, slipping in near the end of the evening. Daniel saw him immediately and his heart jumped. The producer stood near the back of the room listening, his face unreadable. When Daniel took a break, David approached quickly. "You never called," he said simply. I didn't think you were serious." "Kid, I'm always serious about talent like yours. Listen, I'm producing a documentary about undiscovered musical prodigies. We're holding auditions next month. I want you there." Daniel's hand started shaking. "I don't know if I can—" "Here." David pulled out his phone. "What's your number?" "I'll text you the details right now. No excuses this time." Daniel rattled off his number, hardly believing this was happening. David's phone buzzed in his hand as he sent the information. "It's next month, Tuesday the 15th at 7 p.m. Can you make it?" Tuesday the 15th. Daniel's mind raced through his mental calendar. Yes, I can be there." "Good." David smiled. "Don't let me down, kid. This could change your life." He walked away, and Daniel stood there, his phone heavy in his pocket with David Chen's message waiting. This was real. This was actually real. Then Rosa appeared at his elbow, her voice quiet. "Mrs. Whitmore needs you to help pack up the gift bags. And she wants you back at the piano in 5 minutes. Her guests are leaving soon." Daniel looked at his mother, looked across the room at Victoria, laughing with her wealthy friends beneath her foundation banner. Looked at the piano where he'd spent months being invisible. "Okay, Mom," he said. "I'll be right there." He walked back to the bench, sat down and played until the last guest left and the last champagne glass was collected, and Victoria pressed $50 into his hand with an absent smile. The message from David Chen glowed on his phone, all the way home. Daniel stared at his phone for the 100th time that week. The message from David Chen was still there, as real as it had been the night he received it. Tuesday the 15th. 7 p.m., an address in Midtown. A chance that people like him weren't supposed to get. He'd circled the date on his calendar in red ink. Counted down the days. Let himself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like if this documentary actually happened. If people saw him not as Rosa's son or the kid who played background music, but as a real musician, someone with talent worth recognizing. Then Victoria's email arrived. Daniel was in the school library when his phone buzzed. The subject line made his stomach drop. Major event, Tuesday the 15th, need you there. His hands went cold as he opened it. Daniel, I'm hosting the most important gala of the season on Tuesday evening. The mayor will be attending, along with several major donors for my foundation. I absolutely need you at the piano. This is crucial. Please confirm you'll be available. I'm counting on you. Arrive by 6 p.m. Victoria Whitmore. Daniel read it 3 times, hoping the date would somehow change. It didn't. Tuesday the 15th. The exact same night as David Chen's audition. The exact same time. He sat there in the library for 20 minutes just staring at the screen. Kids around him chatted and laughed and complained about homework. Normal problems. Normal lives. Finally, he called his mother. Mom, I need to talk to you. Rosa could hear the strain in his voice immediately. What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine. Can you take a break? I need to tell you something. They met at a coffee shop near Rosa's bus stop. She only had 30 minutes before she had to get to her afternoon cleaning job. But she sat down across from her son and gave him her full attention the way she always did. Daniel explained everything. The audition, the documentary, David Chen's reputation and what this opportunity could mean, and then Victoria's email, landing like a bomb on top of all his hopes. Rosa listened without interrupting. When he finished, she reached across the small table and took his hand. You have to go to the audition, she said firmly. Mom, Victoria's counting on me. She said it's her most important event. If I don't show up, then she'll find another pianist. Daniel, this is your chance. Do you know how rare this is? Someone like David Chen doesn't offer opportunities like this to just anyone. But your job, Daniel's voice cracked. If I don't show up, she'll be furious. She might fire you. We can't afford that. We need her salary. We need the apartment she helped us get. Rosa's jaw tightened. She was quiet for a long moment, and Daniel could see her doing the mental math, calculating bills and rent and his senior year expenses, all the things they needed that her salary barely covered. We'll figure it out, she said finally, but her voice wasn't quite as certain as her words. No. Daniel pulled his hand back. No, I'm not risking your job. Not for this. It's just one audition. Maybe there'll be other chances. Daniel, Mom, please. I've already decided. He hadn't, not really, but saying it out loud made it feel more real, more like a choice he could live with. I'll email Victoria right now. I'll confirm I'll be there. Rosa looked at her son with an expression that broke his heart. Pride and sadness and frustration all mixed together. She knew what he was giving up. They both did. You're a good son, she whispered. Better than I deserve. Don't say that. Daniel's throat felt tight. You've given up everything for me. The least I can do is play piano at a party. He sent the confirmation email to Victoria before he could change his mind. Her response came back within minutes. Wonderful. Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver. That night, Daniel sat on his bed with his old keyboard on his lap, playing with headphones on so he wouldn't disturb the neighbors. His fingers moved through the piece he'd planned to perform at the audition. A Ravel composition he'd been perfecting for months. His own arrangement, his own interpretation. Something that would have shown David Chen exactly what he could do. He played it until his fingers ached, memorizing every note even though no one would ever hear it the way it was meant to be heard. The next morning, he drafted an email to David Chen. It took him an hour to write 3 sentences. Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry, but I can't make the audition on the 15th. I have a family obligation I can't get out of. I understand if you need to move forward with other candidates. Thank you for thinking of me. Daniel Martinez. He stared at the send button for 10 minutes before finally pressing it. David Chen's response came that afternoon, and it was shorter than Daniel expected. Disappointed, but I understand. If anything changes, let me know. You've got real talent, kid. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Daniel read those last words over and over. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. As if talent alone was enough. As if the world actually worked that way. Tuesday the 15th arrived gray and cold. Daniel got dressed in his worn blazer, checked that his dress shoes were polished as well as they could be, and took the long subway ride to Victoria's building. He arrived at 6 p.m. exactly. Rosa was already there, directing the catering staff and making sure every detail was perfect. She squeezed his shoulder as he walked past, and he could feel all the things she wasn't saying. The penthouse looked even more elaborate than usual. Flowers everywhere, ice sculptures, a photographer setting up in the corner. This wasn't just important to Victoria. This was everything. Daniel sat at the piano and warmed up his fingers. Through the windows, he could see the city lights starting to come on as dusk settled. Somewhere out there, across town, the audition was happening. Someone else was sitting in front of David Chen, playing their heart out, taking the chance that should have been his. He pushed the thought away and focused on the keys in front of him. Guests started arriving at 7. Daniel recognized the mayor immediately, surrounded by security and assistants. Major CEOs, celebrity philanthropists, everyone who was anyone in New York's charitable circles. And Victoria moved through them all like she was born for this, gracious and charming and passionate about her foundation's mission. She kept glancing at the piano, making sure Daniel was there, making sure the music was flowing. She even smiled at him once, a quick flash of approval that said, "Good job staying in the background where you belong." Daniel played for 3 hours straight, his best pieces, his most complex arrangements. Music that would have made David Chen sit up and take notice, wasted on a crowd that treated it like expensive wallpaper. At 9 o'clock, Victoria took the microphone. She stood directly in front of the piano again, and Daniel had to stop playing to give her the spotlight. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Victoria began, her voice warm and sincere. "This foundation means everything to me because I believe in the power of discovering untapped potential. I believe that talent exists everywhere, in every neighborhood and every background. We just have to open our eyes and really see it." The crowd applauded. Victoria continued, her speech building to an emotional crescendo about breaking down barriers and giving opportunities to those who deserved them, but couldn't access them. Daniel sat 3 feet behind her, his hands resting on silent keys, listening to her talk about the very thing she'd prevented him from pursuing, just by asking him to be here. The irony was so thick he could taste it. Victoria finished her speech to standing ovation. The mayor shook her hand. Cameras flashed. It was her moment, her triumph, and it was real. She genuinely believed in what she was saying. She truly wanted to help people. She just couldn't see the person right behind her who needed that help most. "Beautiful speech," someone said near the piano. Daniel looked up to see an elderly woman in pearls. "And you play wonderfully, young man. What conservatory do you attend?" "I don't," Daniel said automatically. "I'm just in high school." "Self-taught then?" "That's remarkable. Have you applied to any programs?" "I tried Juilliard. Didn't work out." The woman's eyes sharpened with interest. "You should try again. With talent like yours, there you are, Patricia." Victoria appeared, smoothly redirecting the conversation. "I need to introduce you to our guest of honor." "Daniel, keep playing, please." She swept the woman away before Daniel could respond, before any connection could be made, before anything could change. Daniel returned to the keys and played until midnight. He played through dessert and coffee and long goodbyes. He played until his fingers were numb and his back ached from sitting so long. When the last guest finally left, Victoria pressed a $100 bill into his hand instead of the usual 50. "You were perfect tonight," she said warmly. "Absolutely perfect. I couldn't have done it without you." $100, twice the usual amount. It felt like a fortune and an insult all at once. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore," Daniel said, "because that's what you were supposed to say." Rosa helped him pack up while she supervised the final cleanup. Neither of them spoke about the audition he'd missed or the documentary he wouldn't be part of. What was there to say? On the subway home, Daniel pulled out his phone. There was one new message from a number he didn't recognize. "Hey, this is Kevin Wu. David Chen gave me your number. I was at the audition tonight. He picked me for the documentary. Just wanted to say I saw some of your videos online. You're really good, man. Sorry you couldn't make it. Maybe next time." Daniel stared at the message until his eyes blurred. Next time. As if there would be a next time. As if opportunities like that grew on trees for kids like him. He deleted the message and put his phone away. His mother reached over and took his hand, and they rode the rest of the way home in silence. Two people who understood exactly what had been lost and exactly why it had to be that way. The $100 bill sat in Daniel's pocket, crisp and new, worth less than nothing at all. 3 weeks after the missed audition, Daniel stopped posting videos online. He stopped practicing in the early mornings. He showed up when Victoria called, played what she asked for, took his money, and went home. The fire that had always burned inside him when he sat at a piano seemed to have dimmed to barely a flicker. Rosa noticed but didn't push. What could she say? They both knew what he'd sacrificed. Talking about it wouldn't change anything. Life moved forward the way it always did. School, work, bills, repeat. Daniel's college application sat half-finished on his desk. He'd started applying to state schools for business degrees. Practical things, safe things. The kind of future that made sense for someone like him. The piano was becoming just another job. Then Victoria's daughter came home from boarding school. Lily Whitmore was 19, home for spring break from her expensive liberal arts college in Vermont. She was everything her mother was, confident, polished, comfortable in her privilege, but with an edge of awareness that Victoria seemed to lack. Maybe it came from being younger. Maybe from being around other students instead of just wealthy donors and business partners. She'd been home for 2 days, mostly staying in her room, when boredom finally drove her to explore the city. She took the subway, something Victoria would have had a heart attack over, and wandered through neighborhoods she'd never bothered to visit before. That's when she saw him. Daniel was sitting on a corner in Washington Heights, his old keyboard set up on a milk crate, his worn case open in front of him for tips. He played with his eyes closed, losing himself in the music the way he always did, not caring that only a handful of people stopped to listen. Lily stopped dead in her tracks, her coffee halfway to her lips. She recognized him immediately. That was the kid who played at her mother's parties. Rosa's son. What was his name again? She'd never actually asked. She pulled out her phone and started recording, something about the scene catching her attention, the way he played with such intensity on this cheap keyboard on a street corner, the concentration on his face, the small pile of dollar bills in his case that probably didn't add up to $20. She watched for 10 minutes, then posted the video to her social media without much thought. Just something interesting she'd seen. A moment that felt real in a way most of her life didn't. Then she went home and forgot about it. The video started getting attention around midnight. First a few dozen likes, then a few hundred. By morning, it had been shared thousands of times. By that afternoon, it was everywhere. Lily woke up to her phone exploding with notifications. Comments were flooding in faster than she could read them. She scrolled through, her eyes getting wider with each one. Who is this kid? Someone find him. That's not just good, that's incredible. On a street keyboard? I'm a session musician in LA, and this kid has better technique than half the people I work with. The way he interprets that progression. I've been playing for 20 years and I couldn't do that. A comment from a verified account caught her eye. Someone named Professor Mitchell from Juilliard. This is exceptional talent. Whoever this young man is, he should be studying at a conservatory, not busking on street corners. If anyone knows him, please put him in touch with me. More comments. From professional musicians, music teachers, and people in the industry, all saying the same thing. This wasn't just some kid playing piano, this was genius. Raw, undeniable genius. Lily sat on her bed, staring at her phone, a strange feeling growing in her chest. She'd seen Daniel play dozens of times at her mother's parties. She'd walked past him without a second thought, treating him like part of the furniture. They all had. But these comments, these people who actually knew music, who understood what they were hearing, they were all saying the same thing. They'd been blind to something extraordinary. Lily got dressed and found her mother in the home office reviewing grant applications for the foundation. Victoria looked up with a smile. Good morning, sweetheart. Sleep well? Mom, I need to show you something. Lily held out her phone. Victoria barely glanced at it. I'm in the middle of reviewing these applications, honey. Can it wait? No, it can't. Something in Lily's voice made Victoria actually look up. Just watch this, please. Victoria took the phone, her reading glasses still perched on her nose. The video started playing. She watched for a few seconds, her expression polite but distracted. Then she stopped. Looked closer. Her face changed. Is that Rosa's son? His name is Daniel, Mom. And yes. Victoria watched the rest of the video in silence. When it ended, she scrolled through some of the comments. The professional praise. The shock from people who understood music at a level Victoria never could. I don't understand, Victoria said slowly. He plays at my events all the time. I knew he was good, but there are over 2 million views, Mom. And look at who's commenting. Lily took her phone back and pulled up more. Music professors, professional pianists, a producer from Deutsche Grammophon. They're all trying to figure out who he is. Victoria sat back in her chair, something uncomfortable crossing her face. 2 million people. I started looking into him after I posted this, Lily continued. Did you know he's been posting videos online for years, under a different name? He's got this whole following of classical music people who've been analyzing his playing. There are literally academic discussions about his interpretations. She pulled up her laptop and showed her mother. Forum discussions, Reddit threads, music theory blogs, all focused on a mysterious young pianist who posted under the username Keys and Dreams. They had no idea he was a teenager, Lily said. No idea he was self-taught. They just knew he was brilliant. Victoria scrolled through the evidence, and with each page her face grew paler. Article after article, discussion after discussion. People treating Daniel's music with the kind of serious academic respect reserved for professional concert pianists. And she'd been paying him $50 to play background music at parties. Mom, Lily said carefully, how long has he been playing at your events? About 4 months now. Victoria's voice sounded distant. And you're launching a foundation dedicated to finding undiscovered talent. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Victoria closed the laptop slowly. I need to talk to Rosa, she said finally. Rosa was in the kitchen, preparing lunch. She looked up nervously when Victoria entered. In all her years working for the Whitmore family, Victoria had rarely come into the kitchen during work hours. Mrs. Whitmore? Is everything okay? Rosa, I need to ask you about Daniel. Victoria's tone was gentle but serious. His piano playing. Where did he learn? Rosa's hand stilled on the cutting board. He taught himself, ma'am. Started when he was 7. Used library books and videos online. Has he ever had formal training? Lessons? We couldn't afford lessons. Rosa's voice was quiet. He used to practice on a keyboard I got at a garage sale. Sometimes the school would let him use their piano during lunch. Victoria felt something heavy settling in her stomach. Has he applied to music schools? Juilliard? Twice. Rosa met her employer's eyes. They rejected him both times, said his recordings weren't professional quality. We couldn't afford the application fees until after the deadlines, and by then, she trailed off with a small shrug that said everything. Why didn't you tell me he was this talented? The question came out more accusatory than Victoria intended. Rosa's expression hardened slightly. With respect, ma'am, I didn't think you were interested. You only ever asked him to play background music. Never asked his last name. Never asked about his dreams or his training. To you, he was just convenient. The words were delivered calmly, professionally, but they landed like a slap. Because Rosa was right. Victoria knew she was right. The audition, Victoria said suddenly, remembering, a few weeks ago. I asked him to play at my gala on the 15th. He seemed upset about the timing. Rosa's jaw tightened. He had to turn down an audition for a documentary. A producer named David Chen wanted him. It was the same night as your party. Victoria felt her breath catch. He chose my party over that audition. He chose making sure I kept my job, Rosa corrected quietly. He was afraid if he said no to you, you'd be angry, that you might fire me. We need this job, Mrs. Whitmore. We need the apartment you helped us get. So yes, he played background music at your party instead of going to an audition that could have changed his life. The kitchen was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Victoria stood there, processing this information, processing all of it. The videos, the talent, the sacrifice. She thought about her speech that night, about standing in front of Daniel while talking about discovering overlooked potential, about giving opportunities to people who deserved them. She'd been so blind, so incredibly monumentally blind. "I need to make this right," Victoria said. Rosa's expression was unreadable. "With respect, ma'am, I'm not sure you can." Daniel stopped believing in himself. He's applying to state schools for business degrees now. He barely touches the piano except when you call him to work. Whatever fire he had, I think he's let it go. But surely if you offer him money, a scholarship, a spot in your foundation? Rosa shook her head. "That's not what he needs. That's what you need so you can feel better about what happened." The words were harsh but not unkind. Rosa had worked for Victoria long enough to know she was a good person. Just a person who'd been so insulated by wealth and privilege that she'd stopped seeing clearly. Victoria left the kitchen and went back to her office. Lily was still there, scrolling through more comments on the video. "People are trying to figure out where he lives," Lily said. "Someone recognized the intersection. A few reporters have already reached out to me asking for information." Victoria sat down heavily. Through the window, she could see the Steinway in her living room. The piano Daniel had played countless times while she talked and laughed and discussed her mission to help people just like him. She'd built an entire foundation on the idea of discovering talent in unexpected places, had given speeches about it, had genuinely believed she was making a difference. And the whole time, genius had been sitting 30 feet away from her, invisible because she decided he was invisible. The recognition was devastating. And it was only the beginning. Victoria spent 3 days planning her approach. She made calls to Juilliard, to Manhattan School of Music, to every prestigious conservatory on the East Coast. She drafted scholarship offers and prepared introductions to influential people in the classical music world. She rehearsed what she would say to Daniel, how she would make this right. On the 4th day, she asked Rosa to bring him to the penthouse for a meeting. Daniel arrived wearing the same worn blazer, the same cautious expression he always wore in Victoria's presence. But something in his eyes had changed. He'd seen the video, seen the comments, watched as strangers recognized something in him that the woman standing in front of him never had. "Daniel, please sit down," Victoria said, gesturing to the couch. She sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "I owe you an apology." Daniel said nothing, just waited. "I've been blind," Victoria continued. "I've spent months talking about discovering talent, about giving opportunities to deserving young people, and I completely failed to see that I had someone extraordinary right in front of me. You've played at my events for months, and I never once asked about your dreams or your training. I treated you like you were invisible, and I'm deeply sorry for that." The words were sincere. Daniel could hear that, but they still felt hollow somehow. "I've made arrangements," Victoria said, her voice gaining confidence as she moved to the part she'd prepared. "Full scholarship to any music school you want. Juilliard has already expressed interest. I've also spoken to several renowned piano instructors who would be honored to work with you. And of course, you'd be the inaugural recipient of my foundation's fellowship. $100,000 over 4 years, plus housing, plus living expenses. Everything you need to pursue your music without worry." She smiled, clearly pleased with herself, clearly expecting gratitude. Daniel sat quietly for a long moment. Then he said, "No." Victoria's smile faltered. "I'm sorry?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to decline." "Daniel, I don't think you understand. This is a full scholarship. Everything paid for. The best instructors in the world. Opportunities that I should have had months ago." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "Opportunities that were in this very room while I played background music and you talked about discovering people like me?" Victoria went pale. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've hosted maybe 20 events since I started playing for you. 20 rooms full of people who could have helped me. Music professors, producers, donors, influential people. You never once introduced me to anyone. You never even told people my full name. I know, and that's why I'm trying to fix it now." "You're trying to fix how you feel," Daniel interrupted gently. "This isn't about me. It's about you not wanting to be the person who overlooked genius while giving speeches about finding it. The words landed hard because they were true. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. I had an audition, Daniel continued, for a documentary that could have changed everything. And I missed it because you needed me to play at your gala. You told me it was crucial, that you were counting on me. So I chose your party over my dreams because my mom needs this job and I was afraid of what would happen if I said no. I didn't know. You didn't ask. Daniel's voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. You never asked what I wanted or what I was giving up. You just assumed I'd be available whenever you needed background music. Victoria felt tears prickling her eyes. She'd expected this conversation to go differently. She'd expected gratitude, maybe some residual hurt feelings, but ultimately acceptance of her generous offer. Instead, she was facing the truth of her own actions, and it was much uglier than she'd wanted to admit. You're right, she said quietly. You're absolutely right about all of it. Daniel softened slightly. He could see that Victoria's regret was genuine. She wasn't a bad person. She was just a person who'd been so insulated by wealth that she'd stopped seeing people clearly. I don't want your guilt money, Mrs. Whitmore, Daniel said. I don't want to be your redemption story. I don't want you to put my face on your foundation's website and tell everyone how you discovered me, when the truth is you only saw me after 2 million strangers pointed out what you'd missed. Then what do you want? Victoria asked. How can I make this right? Daniel was quiet for a moment thinking. Then he said, You really want to help people like me? Yes, genuinely yes. Then stop looking for talent in the places you expect to find it. Stop hosting fancy galas and giving speeches. Actually go into communities and see people. Not as projects or stories or photo opportunities, as people with dreams who just need someone to open a door. Victoria nodded slowly. I can do that. And there's something else. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed her a list he'd been keeping. 10 names. Kids from his school, his neighborhood. Other young musicians he'd met online who had talent but no resources. These people fund their education, not through your foundation with all its publicity and requirements. Just quietly help them. No press releases, no naming rights. Just give them what they need to pursue their music. Victoria looked at the list. You want me to fund 10 scholarships? Anonymously? That's the deal. You do this and I'll consider letting you help me, but not as your poster child, not as your success story, just as someone who's trying to make it, same as anyone else. And the foundation fellowship? Give it to someone who needs it more than I do, someone who hasn't already had the attention I've gotten from that video. Daniel met her eyes, real help for people who are still invisible. Victoria felt something shift inside her. This wasn't the redemption story she'd imagined. It was better. More honest, more real. Okay, she said. I agree to your terms. One more thing, Daniel added. My mom keeps her job. No matter what. Even if you and I have problems down the road, even if this doesn't work out, Rosa keeps her job and her apartment. She's worked for your family for 6 years and she's never done anything but be professional and loyal. This doesn't affect her, ever. Of course, Victoria meant it. Rosa has always been wonderful. This was never about her. Daniel stood up. Then we have a deal. Set up those 10 scholarships first. Once they're in place and the money's secured, then we can talk about what comes next for me. He extended his hand. Victoria stood and shook it, feeling for the first time like she was seeing Daniel clearly. Not as the help's son, not as a convenient pianist, not even as a prodigy to be saved, just as a young man with dignity and dreams and the strength to demand respect instead of accepting charity. After Daniel left, Victoria sat alone in her living room. The Steinway stood silent in the corner. She thought about all those parties, all those speeches, all that passion for discovering talent that had meant nothing when it mattered most. Her phone buzzed. An email from David Chen, the producer. Lily must have given him Victoria's contact information. Ms. Whitmore, I heard about the viral video of Daniel Martinez. I'm the producer who offered him an audition he couldn't attend. I understand the conflict was due to a commitment to perform at one of your events. I'm willing to give him another chance, but I wanted to reach out to you first. Please let me know if we can arrange something that works for everyone involved. Victoria stared at the email for a long time. Then she replied, Mr. Chen, Daniel's schedule is his own to manage. I will make sure no event of mine ever interferes with his opportunities again. Please coordinate directly with him. Best, Victoria Whitmore. She copied Daniel on the email and pressed send. It wasn't redemption. Not yet. But it was a start. 6 months later, Victoria sat in Carnegie Hall. Not in a private box. Not in a VIP section. In a regular seat in the mezzanine, surrounded by normal people who'd bought their tickets like everyone else. Rosa sat beside her, dressed in her best outfit, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. On stage, Daniel sat at a grand piano. The documentary had happened. Then a profile in the New York Times. Then this, his first major public recital, arranged by David Chen and funded by several organizations, including Victoria's Foundation, though her name appeared nowhere in the program.